Good afternoon. This is MJ again. I wanted to do a quick video, which I think is, excuse me, fairly important. It's about political and economic myths, which this video can apply to anybody, and I encourage anybody to take whatever they can from it, whatever they see fit or necessary. But in some respect, I'm talking specifically to communities of color, and during my commentary here, I think you'll see exactly what I mean. So I'll start thusly. And once again, I've taken jotted down a few notes that I'll gently read from, just to give you an understanding of how I'm thinking about this, how my brain's working. And I start by saying all communities are susceptible to myths, conjecture, and other great tales, but communities of color, especially the black community, is the community that can least afford to fall victim to these misunderstandings. So now a lot of this is just going to be very snapshot, right? And I encourage many of you to look up some of the things that I'm talking about, because I've looked them up. And it was a part of my education and teaching experience. So, but does that mean I'm right about everything all the time? No. So I encourage you guys to follow along by doing your own reading as well, right? So let's not just appeal to authority here, okay? So first thing is the president, POTUS, as he's often called, he, or maybe coming up soon she, who knows, it has little or nothing to do with the economy, which most people vote on. So if you ask most potential voters, the candidate that you're voting for, what's your number one issue that you would vote for that candidate or any candidate? Most people would say, well, the economy. My concerns are with the economy. But if the president really doesn't have much, if anything, to do with the economy, why would that be your number one issue in voting? So even if somebody said, well, MJ, you got to understand. So let's take stimulus money. The president released or approved a stimulus bill, let's just say during COVID, which in one way or another affected the economy, put money in the pockets of people and so on or whatever. Okay, sure. Or if they said, okay, well, the president worked with the Department of Energy to work with car manufacturers to make more fuel-efficient cars, thus cutting down the price of gas. Yeah, sure, that's indirect, right? But this whole idea that he has this magic wand when they say, well, this was Trump's economy, or this was Biden's economy, or Obama's economy. No, that's not what they're talking about. So like President Biden attempted to offset prices of things like insulin, right, because of inflation. It's like, okay, well, things are costing a lot or expensive everywhere. So if I offset the price of this one thing, people will be able to either afford this drug or have a little bit more purchasing power. That has nothing to do with how the market works. That has nothing to do with the ebb and flow of the market. Essentially speaking, the economy as people understand it, right? The presidents know this, their cabinet members know this, and their economic advisors know this. But it's just been this old lore that people, particularly presidents or other candidates, have run on for, the past million years, and people have bought into it. To now, it's just become conjecture at very best, as far as I'm concerned. It's something that's always thought to be true, but never really proven to be so. Moving on. POTUS, or President of the United States, has nothing to do with gas prices. Nothing. Zero. Gotta ask yourself, so are oil producers largely the large main industry is OPEC, right? They're a conglomerate of oil producing countries and other firms, right? They make money through speculation and controlling the release of how much oil they're going to put out into the market. And often it's for political reasons, right? So if there's a shortage of something, that increases the demand of something, because oil is a good that cannot be replaced, right? It is inexchangeable good. It's inflexible. right? Or in economics, this was called inelastic. And an inelastic good is a good that there's no replacement for, or no alternative. An elastic good is something that you can have an alternative to. So let's just say you can't afford a car. Well, you can maybe do public transportation. Let's say you can't do public transportation, where you can have a bicycle. Right? Let's say you can do none of those things. Well, you can walk, right, and so on or whatever. Right? And that's much cheaper than all of them. Right? It might cost you some energy and some calories, but that's about it. But oil itself, much like insulin, even is an inelastic good. There's no alternative to it. So usually the price for those things can't really be negotiated much. Maybe a little bit more with insulin because it's more of a public need or public good. Let's just call it a public good, something that everybody can benefit from. But not everybody has a car, so not everybody necessarily needs gasoline, so to speak. So a lot of people will also say, well, MJ, so why don't we just pump our own gas and be, let's just call it, as they say, energy independent? We don't have to worry about all these other countries. Well, if you look up who produces the most oil in the country and have been so for the past, 10 years now, it will be the United States. The United States produces more barrels of oil than any other country in the world. So by that very same logic, then we should have cheap gas. I think what people are missing is that oil is an international commodity, and it's traded on a global market. Do you really think they're going to forgo trillions of dollars so most people's fat ass can have cheap gas? I don't think so. Okay, that's just not the way business works. Okay, so therefore, companies, or let's just say the United States, also, by the way, recognize that oil companies, as large as they are, have a hard time doing this. This is one of the reasons why they get subsidies from the U.S. government and other governments to keep the oil coming, to keep the oil flowing. Because you got to understand, if you know anybody that works in the oil markets, you have to understand how much resources they put into a well and how much extraction that they're actually going to get back. Whatever. So they may lose money, they may make money in that particular venture, or they may lose money. So that's why they have to be, that's one of the reasons anyways, why they have to be subsidized. So these are things that the president has really no real control over, contrary to what people tend to think. Also, inflation. This was a big one recently, wasn't it? President doesn't have anything to do with inflation. If you want to blame people for inflation, you could blame maybe the Federal Reserve, because you need a federal central bank in a state capitalist economy, right? If I'm able to raise and lower interest rates and control the money supply, does that not affect inflation? So let's just say go back to year 2000, when we brought interest rates down to zero or next to zero, where people were more likely to borrow, which thus meaning putting more money into the economy, floating around. And wages, at least nominally, had started to rise even at that time. And in some respects still today. Don't you think that causes an inflationary problem? This isn't something that, let's just say, Biden did. This isn't something that Trump did. This is not something that Obama did, or every president before that. It really had little or nothing to do with that at all. I wish people would start reading the economic literature on how inflation works and what it is and the various types of inflation. And even the inflation in the stock market. Even some of the wealthier people didn't need a stimulus check. When they got their check, their check went to market, which caused an inflationary problem in the stock market. For most people that got their stimulus check, they need tires for their car, or they need this and that or whatever. Well, wealthier people already have those things. The next thing they do is just throw it in their investment portfolio. That's it. So that ended up causing an inflationary problem. So I encourage people to read the literature on that. So ultimately, how does this affect communities of color? Well, let's take the 2016 primaries in the election. It was they were trying to find out who the nominee was going to be, and if anybody knows the way political parties are set up as far as delegates, the Republican Party has, I don't remember how many, I think it's 700 to 1,000 or whatever, pledged delegates, which means they have to go with the candidate that people want. And you also have the Democratic Party. There's thousands of delegates, and some of them are pledged delegates, and some of them are super delegates. And super delegates can vote their conscience. They don't have to vote people. So interestingly enough, there was a study that came out. I should have probably posted it. here or work the source in somewhere here, but there was something I found that was very interesting about them. So and you can check me on this and go back and look this up. But when the Biden administration was taken off, they did not run on things like education, healthcare, and labor, wages, unions, or anything like that. These are three things that directly affect minority communities adversely, particularly the Black community, the most. But the Biden campaign didn't run on that. But the Sanders campaign did. They wanted to say, hey, we need to extend better educational resources, better job opportunities. We need to do something about unionizing and getting more people of color into the fold, and better healthcare services for outcomes and so on, and stuff like that. Even in some of our medical research, even some cancer studies, it has been found that there's not enough research for various forms of breast cancer for women of color, because for whatever reason they don't do those types of studies on women of color. And I don't know, you can make up any reason why that is, or let's go read the literature on why that might be the case. Okay, so what they have found was older Black people voted for Biden. He was with Obama, he had name recognition, he was a longtime politician and so on. Even though Biden didn't run on these issues that I just mentioned, younger Black people, surprisingly, voted to have Bernie Sanders put on the ticket. Why? Because they recognized in this generational shift that these issues such as education, labor, and healthcare were issues that were apparent to them, that they needed some type of help with or solace on. So there seemed to be somewhat of a generational shift in thinking, and it seemed to be more progressive than it was conservative. And I may have talked about this before, and if I haven't, I will, about the difference between conservatism and liberalism and what these things mean, because both sides of the fence are very broad and very categorized, and they don't necessarily mean what you think they mean, because I think most people think about these things in terms of Democratic versus Republican Party. It's not that simple. It just really isn't. And a little bit of this goes into what's called political theory, and maybe soon I'll do a video on what political theory is. So I just thought that was a very interesting signification of where we are where Black people are, where we are as a community, and how we're thinking about these things, as far as economic prosperity, social prosperity, and so on. Lastly, do communities of color need a president who looks like them? And do they need a Black president? I don't know. Do they really? So, who leads the country in income and education right now? Asian people. Second to them, whites. After that, Hispanics. Then Blacks. Asians were leading the charge in income and education. I think there's one Asian senator that I can think of, and I think his last name is Liu. Have you ever seen an Asian president in the United States? Have you ever seen one run for president, except for that last guy? I forget his name, but he didn't get very far. I can't remember his name at the moment. But how much leadership do you see in the House and Senate of people that are Asian? How much leadership do you see in local and state governments of people who are Asian? It's just not there. So why are they doing so well? Well, you have to find out. You got to ask them, I suppose, right? Maybe they're doing something that we're not, right? Whatever that is, I can imagine some of the things. I think they're still disparted a bit from typical Western culture, in the sense that, you turn 18, you kind of leave the house and so on, or whatever, whether you're in school or not, or maybe 22 or 23 or whatever the case is. A lot of these communities, at least from my experience, are, as long as you're in school, to be either doctor, lawyer, engineer, you stay home, you eat for free, you live for free, or whatever, until you become doctor, lawyer, engineer. Well, that's a little bit, for the most part, largely antithetical to the Western thought process on how we raise our kids and where they're going to go in life, and how we're going to assist with that or not assist with that. And I think that may have something to do with it. And I would imagine the reason for this success is manifold as well. There are other reasons to that, right? Even if they're immigrants, especially if they're first generation immigrants. First generation immigrants tend to be statistically far more successful than second, third, and so on. Because wherever they came from, where their parents came from, it's usually, no matter how bad it may be here, it's usually a step up from where they came from. So they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to work. Here, something goes wrong for us, the first thing they say is, well, can I get another loan? So obviously they're doing something different than we're not. So this was just a little snapshot, a little bit of food for thought. And once again, cheers. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me know if you agree, disagree. Let me know if you like some of the content. If you don't like it, I'm fine with that too. And maybe we all, in some form, fashion, or another, maybe can have kind of like a group discussion about this online and talk about these issues plainly. I would encourage other people who are either well-read or even academics. I've dealt with them all. I don't really care so much about what your credentials are. I care about what your content is. Are these things that we're talking about? Are they accurate? Are they verifiable? Essentially speaking, are they true? I don't care if you're a high school dropout, and I don't care if you're a college professor. I've worked with both. I've worked with high school dropouts. I've definitely worked with college professors. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to we all know different things. And we all, I do believe, have some value to add to the conversation. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.